husband on Instagram, sharing a photo of the pair embracing alongside a lengthy caption. My immediate thoughts about Ted: he swept into my life, a gloriously handsome, deeply romantic, swashbuckling pirate, and I've never been the same. He needed me. No one had ever let me know they needed me, and this wasn't your average human being that needed me. This was the creator of...
She is 88 now. This past May, a name that shaped 10 years of her life left the world for good. Ted Turner. The man who built CNN out of nothing. The man she once called, without irony, her favorite ex-husband. They had been divorced for over 2 decades by the time he died. And still, when the news came, she wrote to the world about him, not as a footnote in her story, but as a chapter that never really closed. She described him once, in her own words, as a man who swept into her life like something out of an old adventure story. Handsome, romantic, a little wild. She said she was never quite the same after him. That is not the language people use for someone who meant nothing. There is something underneath that tribute, something she has spent years circling in interviews, in her memoir, in quiet rooms with a microphone in front of her. It is not a scandal. It is not a secret in the tabloid sense. It is something harder to say out loud than any scandal could be, that she loved him enough to build a life around him, and left him anyway, because staying would have meant disappearing. She has said that leaving nearly broke her. We will get to why. But first, we have to go back to where the fire started. Picture 1990. Fonda had just ended her marriage to activist Tom Hayden. A marriage that had already cost her a breakdown so complete she once said she couldn't speak above a whisper, could barely eat, could barely walk faster than a shuffle. Into that fragile moment came a phone call. Loud, immediate, unmistakably him. Ted Turner had heard she was getting divorced, and he wanted to know if it was true. Then he asked her out. She said no. He didn't take no as an answer meant to last. 6 months later, she said yes. By 1991, they were married. For a decade, Fonda stepped back from the spotlight she had occupied her entire adult life. The Oscars, the activism, the fame that had defined her since she was a young woman photographed everywhere she went. She became, by her own account, the one standing slightly behind him at events. The follower instead of the leader. She has talked about this without bitterness. In therapy, she said, she learned something true about long partnerships. Sometimes one person leads and the other has to learn to follow well. For a while she did. But somewhere in the following, a version of herself started to go quiet. You know this arrangement, even if your own version of it never made the news. The moment in a long relationship where you have gotten so good at making room for someone else that you stop noticing how small your own room has become. Where the shrinking happens so slowly you mistake it for peace. That is the golden fire underneath this decade. 2 million acres, a media empire, a marriage the tabloids called one of the great love stories of the 1990s, and underneath all of it, a woman quietly disappearing into a supporting role in her own life. By the time she turned 62, Fonda had not had a paying job in 15 years. She has described what came next with unusual honesty for someone of her stature. She said there were 2 voices in her head. One told her to stay. He was rich, he was fun, he would take care of her, why leave a good thing this late in life? The other voice was quieter, harder to hear, and it told her something she didn't want to know. If she stayed until the end, she would never become who she was capable of being. She chose the quiet voice. She has said it was terrifying. Think about where you were in 2001. Whatever you were carrying that year, a job you hated, a marriage you weren't sure about, a version of yourself you suspected you'd buried to keep someone else comfortable. Fonda was living her own version of that same crossroads, except hers played out with the whole country watching. She left. It was, in her words, hard. What makes this more than a simple divorce story is what happened on the other side of it, to him. Turner wrote his own account of that period in his memoir years later. He described coming back to the ranch they'd shared after the split was final, walking into the bedroom, and seeing her side of the closet standing empty. He said he sat down on the floor between the 2 closets and cried. In 2012, a British interviewer pressed him on television. Was Jane Fonda the great love of his life? Turner didn't deflect. He said he had never gotten over losing her, and he doubted he ever would. Sit with that for a moment. A man who built one of the largest media empires in American history, who owned a baseball team, who reshaped how the entire country got its news, and the loss he could never fully explain away was a woman who chose to leave him so she could stay whole. She has said something similar, in her own careful way. That she had to hide part of herself to keep the peace with him. That a small, persistent voice had warned her, "Stay, and you will never be authentic, never be whole." Neither of them, by their own accounts, ever fully closed that door. What happened after the divorce is, in its own way, the more unusual story. They didn't disappear from each other's lives. They stayed close enough that he showed up to her 80th birthday party. Close enough that, in 2013, they were photographed together at a charity dinner, easy in each other's company, decades removed from the marriage. Close enough that when he was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia in 2018 and slowly withdrew from public life, she kept speaking about him with open affection, crediting him publicly for standing by her during hard years in Georgia, saying plainly that without his support she wasn't sure they would have survived that period at all. This is the quiet terror underneath the tribute she wrote in May. She is one of the last people left who actually remembers who he was before the disease took the last years from him. The friends from that era are aging or gone. The empire he built has been folded into other empires. The cultural moment that made Hanoi Jane and the most powerful man in cable television household names on the same nightly news broadcasts has faded into something younger viewers only half recognize. She is still here, carrying the memory of a decade most of the people who lived through it beside her cannot carry anymore. There is something almost unbearably human in that. Loving someone enough to leave them for your own sake, and then spending the next 25 years being the person who remembers him most faithfully. When Ted Turner died this May at 87, Fonda didn't issue a careful publicist statement. She wrote something personal, something that read like it came from the same woman who once stood terrified in front of two competing voices in her own head. She called him the pirate who swept into her life and changed her permanently. Not my ex-husband. Not a business partner. A man who altered the shape of who she became, even after, especially after, she left him. That is the final truth underneath all of this. Not a scandal, not a hidden confession, but something more difficult to sit with. You can leave someone because staying would cost you yourself, and still spend the rest of your life honoring what he gave you. Both things can be true. She has never pretended otherwise. There is a particular kind of honesty in a woman who, at 88, having buried a father with visible regrets, having survived 3 marriages and a public life scrutinized since she was a girl, still chooses to speak plainly about the man she left. Not to rewrite the ending, just to tell the truth of what it cost and what it gave her in the same breath. That is rarer than a happy ending. It might be worth more. Close your eyes for a second if you can while this plays. Think about the year you first knew who Jane Fonda was. Maybe it was a movie. Maybe it was the news footage from Vietnam. Maybe it was much later, a workout tape, a courtroom drama, a climate protest on the steps of the Capitol. Think about what you were carrying in your own life that year. Who you were trying to become. Who you were quietly leaving behind to get there. If you want, leave that year in the comments. Not for engagement. Just because this is one of the few places left where people who actually lived through those decades can say so, out loud, to people who understand exactly what that means.